The wedding gift slipped out of Emily's hands and shattered on the porch the second the bride opened the front door. It wasn't because her ex-fiancé was getting married. She already knew that. She had received the invitation 3 weeks earlier and cried about it exactly once, in the shower, where nobody could hear her. She froze because the woman standing in the doorway in white lace, smiling like a woman 30 years younger than she actually was Patricia Brooks, her old landlord. The same woman who once knocked on Emily's door at 9:47 p.m. to complain that her laughter traveled through the floorboards like an earthquake. The same woman who fined a tenant $25 for excessive joy in a shared hallway. Emily had spent months convincing herself that forgiving Daniel for cheating was the hardest thing she would ever do. She had no idea that watching him marry Patricia Brooks would become the funniest, strangest, most satisfying afternoon of her entire life. "Emily," Patricia said, blinking at her like she was doing long division in her head. "You're here." Daniel didn't mention he invited his ex. "He didn't," Emily said, forcing a smile. "You did. It's on the card. Look closer, Patricia. It says +1, and I'm the +1 to my own disaster." Somewhere behind Patricia, a voice that Emily hadn't heard in 8 months cracked like a dropped glass. "Emily, why are you?" Daniel appeared in the doorway in a tuxedo 2 sizes too tight, sweat already beading on his forehead even though the wedding hadn't started. "Stay with her for the next 40 minutes, because what happened at that wedding still doesn't sound real, even to the people who were standing in that backyard watching it happen with their own eyes. Before diving deeper, let everyone know in the comments where they're watching this from. Genuinely, it means a lot to see where this story is reaching. And if this is the first time watching, now is the moment to hit that subscribe button so nobody misses what's coming in the next video. 6 months earlier, Emily's life looked nothing like this. She was 29, sharp, and exhausted in the specific way that comes from working 2 jobs while planning a wedding on a budget that kept shrinking every time Daniel forgot his wallet. She managed a boutique marketing firm during the day and picked up freelance graphic design work at night. She was the kind of tired that made her fall asleep with her laptop still open, invoices half finished, her ring finger aching from a ring that, in hindsight, she had basically bought for herself. Daniel was charming in the way expensive cologne is charming. Pleasant at first, overwhelming once you noticed it everywhere. He had a laugh that made strangers turn their heads and a talent for ordering the most expensive item on any menu and then patting his pockets in confusion when the check arrived. "Babe," he'd say, sliding the bill toward her with 2 fingers, like it was something contagious. "We're a team, right? Team players don't keep score." What he meant, and what Emily eventually understood him to mean, was, "You pay, I clap." Their engagement had all the surface sparkle of a couple in love. Brunches, photo shoots, a ring he swore he saved for even though Emily later found the credit card statement herself. Underneath it, there were cracks she kept patching with hope. He forgot her birthday and blamed his phone for losing the reminder. He borrowed money from her savings account just for the weekend 3 separate times. He once introduced her to his coworkers as "my future problem" and laughed like it was a joke everyone was supposed to enjoy. Their landlord, Patricia Brooks, made their shared apartment feel like a hostage situation with a security deposit attached. She was in her early 60s, twice widowed, and richer than half the buildings on the block combined. Yet she still personally inspected every unit for infractions like a woman on a mission from God. Her rules were legendary among the tenants. No laughing after 6 p.m. because sound travels and sound is disrespectful. Welcome mats had to be blue, specifically cerulean, not navy, I can tell the difference. Houseplants had to face east for the energy, though nobody ever dared ask what energy she meant. No cooking fish on Wednesdays, a rule so oddly specific that 3 different tenants had tried and failed to find its origin story. Every single person in that building hated her, quietly, the way people hate landlords everywhere, with polite smiles in the hallway and furious group chats behind closed doors. Emily used to laugh about it with Daniel, back when laughing with him still felt easy. She probably eats disappointment for breakfast, Emily had joked one night, curled against him on their second-hand couch. Daniel had laughed too, loud and easy. That woman will die alone in that mansion, counting her money and yelling at pigeons. Neither of them could have imagined what was coming. Emily remembered one night in particular, months before everything unraveled, when she'd come home late from a client meeting to find Daniel sprawled on the couch, phone inches from his face, laughing at something that clearly wasn't her presence. "Long day?" he'd asked, not looking up. 14 hours, Emily said, kicking off her heels. The Hendricks account almost fell apart. I basically saved it single-handedly. "That's great, babe." He still hadn't looked up. "Hey, did you transfer the rent yet? It's due tomorrow and my check hasn't cleared." Emily had stood there, exhausted, still in her work blazer, and felt something small and quiet crack inside her chest. Not a break. Just a hairline fracture. The kind you don't notice until years later when you're piecing together exactly when things started going wrong. "I transferred it Tuesday, Daniel, like I do every month." Right, of course you did." He'd finally looked up, flashed that smile that used to make her stomach flip and now just made her tired. "You're the best, you know that? I don't know what I'd do without you." Probably starve, she'd thought, but didn't say it. Patricia, meanwhile, had her own methods of making everyone's life memorably difficult. She once left a laminated notice taped to Emily and Daniel's door that read, in 14-point font, "Reminder. Excessive footstep noise between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. constitutes a lease violation. This is your only warning. Management." She heard me walking to the bathroom, Emily had said, incredulous, holding the notice up to Daniel. She fined the Petersons for playing music at a normal volume on a Saturday afternoon. A Saturday, Daniel. "She's unhinged," Daniel had agreed, laughing. "Absolutely unhinged. Imagine actually marrying a woman like that. You'd have to sign your whole life away just to use the microwave after 9. They'd both laughed at that, hard, the kind of laugh shared between two people who thought they knew exactly how their story would end. Neither of them knew how wrong they both were. The cheating wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a lipstick on the collar, caught in a hotel room kind of scandal. It was almost embarrassingly ordinary. Daniel accidentally sent Emily a selfie meant for someone named Brianna. The caption read, "Can't wait for tonight, wifey material for real." The photo showed him shirtless in a gym mirror, sending a message clearly meant for someone who wasn't his fiancé. Emily stared at her phone for 11 full minutes without moving. Then she called him. "Hey, babe," Daniel answered, breathless, like he'd been running. "What's up? Who's Brianna?" Silence stretched so long Emily could hear his heartbeat change through the phone. "Emily, I can explain." "You don't have to explain. You have to stop talking so I can hear myself think." What followed was the messiest, most humiliating week of Emily's life. Daniel showed up at her office with flowers he probably didn't pay for. He cried in front of her mother. He got his own mother to call Emily and beg on his behalf, using phrases like, "He made a mistake," and "young men stumble," as if cheating were something that happened to him rather than something he chose. "Emily, please," Daniel had said, kneeling on her mother's kitchen floor, tears streaming in a way that would have been convincing if Emily hadn't already caught him rehearsing a similar speech in the bathroom mirror the night before. "Brianna was nothing. A mistake. One text. It'll never happen again. I swear on everything I love." "You swore on everything you loved when you proposed," Emily said quietly. "I'm trying to figure out what that word means to you." Her mother, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, wasn't much help either. "Emily, baby, every man makes mistakes. Your father made mistakes. You forgive, you move forward, you build something stronger from it." "Did Dad send a shirtless gym selfie to a woman named Brianna?" Her mother didn't have an answer for that. Family pressure did what family pressure always does. It confused guilt with love. Emily forgave him, publicly, in front of both families, at a dinner where Daniel cried real tears and promised, hand over heart, that Brianna meant nothing, that it would never happen again, that Emily was the only woman he ever truly wanted to build a life with. She believed him for exactly 19 days. Then, quietly, without another dramatic scene, without another family dinner, she ended it. No yelling, no ultimatum. Just a text. I forgave you, Daniel. That doesn't mean I have to stay. He called 11 times that night. She didn't answer once. 2 days later, he was gone. Not just from her life. From the apartment, from the building, from everyone's radar entirely. He stopped posting online. He stopped responding to his own friends. It was as if he'd evaporated. His mother called Emily once more, this time not to beg, but to ask, almost accusingly, "Do you know where he is? He's not answering me either." "No," Emily said honestly. "But if you find him, tell him he left his charger. I'm not mailing it." Nobody knew where Daniel went. Emily told herself she didn't care. Months passed the way months do after heartbreak. Slowly, then suddenly, then not so bad anymore. Emily got a new job at a bigger firm, one that didn't require freelancing until midnight just to make rent. She moved into a small apartment of her own, no landlord named Patricia in sight, and started sleeping through the night again. She started laughing without checking the clock first. She thought she was done thinking about Daniel entirely. Then the invitation arrived. Cream-colored envelope, gold foil lettering. Her name spelled correctly, which somehow made it worse. You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Daniel Whitfield and Patricia Brooks. Emily read it twice, laughed out loud once, assumed it was some kind of prank, and then read it a third time when the laugh didn't come back. Patricia Brooks, the landlord, the blue welcome mat. No laughing after 6, fish-hating landlord who was old enough to be Daniel's mother. Emily sat on her kitchen floor, invitation in hand, and laughed until she cried, and then cried until she laughed again, and honestly could not tell any more which emotion was doing the driving. She decided, almost instantly, that she was going. Not for revenge, not exactly. She told herself it was closure. Really, it was curiosity so intense it felt like hunger. The wedding was set in Patricia's sprawling backyard, the kind with a fountain that probably cost more than Emily's yearly salary. String lights hung between old oak trees. A live quartet played something classical and vaguely funereal. Waiters moved through the crowd holding trays of champagne that nobody but the bride seemed to be truly enjoying. Daniel looked exhausted before the ceremony had even started. His tuxedo fit like a costume rented in the wrong size. His smile looked practiced, the kind of smile people wear when a photographer says, "One more," for the 15th time. Patricia, meanwhile, acted like a teenager on prom night. She checked his tie every 4 minutes. She corrected the angle of his smile in photos. "More teeth, Daniel. You look constipated." She handed him a small cup of vitamins before the ceremony and watched him swallow them like a nurse monitoring medication compliance. "Call me Honey Bear during the vows," Patricia instructed him loudly enough for 3 rows of guests to hear. "It tests well with my sisters." Daniel nodded, jaw tight, and said, "Yes, Honey Bear," in a voice so flat it sounded pre-recorded. A photographer moved through the crowd, snapping candid shots, and at one point asked Daniel and Patricia to look lovingly at each other for the camera. Daniel's smile faltered so visibly in the resulting photo that the photographer, without thinking, muttered, "Let's try that again, maybe with a little more conviction?" Guests whispered behind their programs. Is he actually going through with this? She's old enough to be his mother. I heard she's worth 11 figures. Maybe not 11, a lot of figures. Then Patricia's sisters arrived from Lagos, and the entire event tilted sideways into something between a sitcom and a courtroom. Cross-examination. There were 4 of them, dressed in matching gold aso oke, moving through the reception like a tribunal that had traveled internationally for the sole purpose of interrogating the groom. "Can you cook?" the eldest sister asked Daniel directly, arms folded. "I mean, I can order takeout very efficiently," Daniel offered, laughing nervously. Nobody laughed with him. Can you iron a shirt? I usually pay someone. How much rent did your parents make you pay growing up? Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. None. I lived at home until I was 26. The sisters exchanged a look so devastating it required no translation. Can you survive without Wi-Fi for one full day? Daniel actually laughed at that one, assuming it was a joke. Nobody else did. What is funny? The second sister demanded, stepping closer. You think this is funny? We flew 14 hours for this wedding, Daniel. You will answer the question. Probably not, Daniel admitted, sweat now visibly darkening the collar of his rented tuxedo shirt. I've never really tried. All four sisters said in unison, a sound of collective judgment so devastating that a nearby guest actually took out her phone to record it, sensing, correctly, that this was content. The third sister, the youngest and by far the most direct, leaned in close enough that Daniel visibly flinched. Do you love our sister, or do you love what our sister has? Patricia and I have a real connection, Daniel stammered. That is not what I asked you. Daniel had no answer for that either. The sisters exchanged a look, nodded once in unified agreement about something none of the other guests were privy to, and drifted toward the open bar, leaving Daniel standing alone, visibly rattled, adjusting a tie that Patricia had already adjusted for him twice. Emily, standing near the edge of the crowd with a glass of champagne she wasn't drinking, watched all of this with the specific joy of someone witnessing karma warm up before the main event. You're enjoying this, said a voice beside her. It was one of Patricia's tenants, a woman named Grace, recognizable from the building's cramped mailroom. I don't blame you. That man tried to get my rent lowered by telling Patricia I was basically family after 2 conversations. He's been buttering people up for months. For months? Emily asked. Since the day they met, Grace said, sipping her champagne. He complimented her garden so much, I thought he was going to propose to the roses instead. If anyone was still watching up to this point, now would be the moment to type, I'm still here, in the comments section, because the story is only about to get louder from here. The ceremony itself was mercifully short. Vows were exchanged. Patricia cried real tears, the kind that suggested she actually believed in this, in him, in whatever future she thought they were building. Daniel's vows sounded rehearsed and hollow, the words of a man reading off cue cards written by someone else's hope. I promise to cherish you, honey bear, he said, and somewhere in the crowd, Emily bit down hard on the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing. The reception moved indoors as the sun dropped low. Round tables, white tablecloths, a 3-tier cake that looked more expensive than Emily's first car, and, at the center of the room, a large projector screen set up for what Patricia had excitedly billed as a beautiful slideshow of our journey together. I made it myself, Patricia announced to the room, tapping her champagne glass with a fork until the chatter died down. Every photo, every memory. Please, everyone, enjoy. A young cousin fumbled with a USB drive at the laptop connected to the projector. There were 2 identical drives on the table. One labeled Wedding Slideshow Final, and one labeled, in smaller handwriting, Daniel Backup, Do Not Show. The cousin, 20 years old and thoroughly unbothered by fate, grabbed the wrong one. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't wedding photos. It was old footage. Daniel's own phone videos, apparently backed up somewhere and forgotten, now playing in high definition for 200 wedding guests. The first clip showed Daniel, shirtless, on a gym mirror selfie video, mid-sentence. Yeah, I'm basically engaged, but it's not real. It's not gonna last, trust me. The room went dead silent. The next clip played automatically. Daniel, sitting in his car, talking to someone off camera. I could never actually marry an older woman. Come on, that's a joke, right? I'm doing this for the money, obviously. 200 people inhaled at the exact same moment. Emily's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Patricia's smile did not move. It simply stopped being a smile and became something else entirely. A stillness that was far more frightening than any scream could have been. "Turn it off," Daniel said, standing so fast his chair clattered backward. "Turn it off. That's old. That's a joke, guys. That was a joke I made with a friend." The clips kept playing, because someone, somewhere, had queued 3 more. A third video, Daniel laughing with a friend off screen. "Bro, she's loaded. Like, actually loaded. I do 6 months, maybe a year, and then I file for divorce and I'm set for life. Worst case, I get a nice settlement. Best case, she just, like, dies naturally, you know? She's old." The gasp that moved through that room was almost theatrical in its unison, as if 200 people had rehearsed it. Someone in the back actually dropped a plate. It shattered against the marble floor, and nobody moved to clean it up because nobody could look away. Patricia stood slowly. She smoothed the front of her wedding dress with both hands, the way someone smooths a tablecloth before an important dinner. Her voice, when it came, was calm in a way that felt more dangerous than shouting ever could have. "Well," she said, "that's certainly one way to find out." "Honey Bear, please, that video is years old. I don't even remember saying that. Don't call me Honey Bear," Patricia said, and something in her tone made the entire wedding party lean forward at once. "You've called me Honey Bear for 3 months. You've never once called me by my actual name unless you needed something signed. Isn't that interesting? A man marries a woman and somehow can only remember her name when there's paperwork involved." "Patricia, please, let's talk about this privately." "We are past privately, Daniel." She picked up her champagne glass, looked at it, and set it back down without drinking. "Do you know what's funny? I already knew." The room, somehow, went even quieter. "I knew the moment you proposed too fast," Patricia continued, voice steady, almost amused. "I knew when you started complimenting my youthful energy every single day like you were reading from a script. I've buried 2 husbands, Daniel. I did not get to 62 years old without learning to recognize a man who loves my bank account more than he loves me. That's not true. So I had my lawyer draft the strictest prenuptial agreement money could produce. You signed it without reading it, which honestly, I found insulting on your behalf. It states in extremely clear language that in the event of divorce, infidelity, annulment, or public humiliation of the bride." She paused there, letting the phrase land like a blade. "You walk away with exactly nothing. Not the house, not the car I gifted you for the engagement, not even the gifts on that table." Daniel's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. "And the mansion you were so excited to move into?" Patricia continued, and for the first time, the faintest smile touched her mouth. "I donated it to a women's shelter foundation 4 months ago. I've been renting my own guest house from the foundation ever since. There is no fortune here, Daniel. There is no inheritance. There is a very comfortable pension, a modest savings account, and a woman who wanted, for once in her life, to marry someone who actually saw her instead of her assets." Silence again. The kind that has weight. "You married for money," Patricia said softly, almost gently, almost sad. "There isn't any." What happened next unfolded fast, the way real chaos always does, not in slow motion, but in a blur of noise and movement that people would spend weeks trying to describe accurately to friends who weren't there. Daniel dropped to his knees in front of 200 witnesses, right there on the marble floor, his tuxedo pants soaking up spilled champagne. "Patricia, please. I'll make it right, I swear. Just don't do this in front of everyone." "You did this in front of everyone," Patricia said. "I'm simply finishing it." 2 security guards Emily hadn't even noticed near the entrance began moving through the crowd, calm and practiced, clearly briefed for exactly this kind of possibility by a woman who had apparently suspected this outcome all along. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," one of them said to Daniel, hand extended, not unkind, but unmistakably firm. "This is humiliating. Daniel hissed, scrambling to his feet. "You planned this. You wanted this to happen." "I planned for the possibility," Patricia corrected calmly. "You provided the certainty." As the guards escorted him toward the exit, Daniel's foot caught the edge of the dessert table. The 3-tier wedding cake tumbled sideways in what felt, to everyone watching, like the universe adding its own punctuation mark. Frosting exploded across the floor. Somewhere near the back, someone had arranged for a symbolic release of white doves to happen at the end of the reception, and the coordinator, panicking and unsure what else to do, released them right on schedule. Birds scattered across the reception hall in every direction as Daniel was walked out past scattered cake, shrieking guests, and at least one auntie who was laughing so hard she genuinely lost her wig, snatching it off the floor without even breaking eye contact with the chaos. Someone had their phone out the entire time, recording everything in vertical video, the way people instinctively do now when they sense history happening in real time. That video would be online within the hour. By morning, it had 2 million views. By the end of the week, Daniel had a nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life online: the groom who married his landlord. The comments underneath the viral clip stretched into the thousands within days. People dissected every frame. Someone slowed down the moment the cake toppled and set it to dramatic orchestral music. Someone else made a compilation of Patricia's face throughout the video, captioned simply, "The exact moment a woman stops performing love and starts performing math." A podcast covered it. A morning talk show mentioned it in passing, blurring Daniel's face out of what the hosts called professional courtesy, though the internet had already unblurred it within the hour. Daniel's own friends distanced themselves publicly, posting statements about how they'd always had a bad feeling about the engagement, conveniently forgetting the group chat messages Daniel had once screenshotted to Emily, bragging about how his friends thought Patricia's money was a smart move. Patricia, for her part, gave one final statement to a reporter who tracked her down outside a coffee shop a week later. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply adjusted her sunglasses and said, "I've buried 2 husbands who loved me for exactly who I was. I refuse to spend my remaining years pretending I don't know the difference between love and arithmetic." Then she walked away, and the clip of that too went mildly viral, mostly because of how unbothered she looked doing it. This is the part of the story where liking this video, subscribing if you haven't already, and dropping a comment would genuinely mean the world. Because what happens next is the part everyone always asks about. Emily didn't stay for the aftermath. She didn't need to watch security walk Daniel to his car, didn't need to hear Patricia give her calm, devastating statement to the 2 remaining relatives still filming on their phones. She quietly finished her champagne, set the glass down on a passing tray, and walked out through the side gate into the cool evening air. She didn't feel triumphant, exactly. She had expected to feel triumphant. Instead, she felt something quieter and stranger, a kind of relief so complete it almost felt like grief for a version of herself who used to carry so much weight for a man who never once considered carrying any of it for her. She drove home with the windows down, music low, and for the first time in almost a year she didn't think about Daniel once for the entire drive. Word of the wedding spread through Emily's own circle faster than she expected. Her mother called the next morning, breathless, having already seen 3 separate versions of the video shared across 4 different group chats. "Emily, is this real? Is that the same Daniel? The same landlord?" "Same everyone, Mom. I owe you an apology," her mother said quietly after a long pause. "I told you to forgive him and stay. I was wrong to push that." "You weren't wrong to want me to forgive him," Emily said, surprising herself with how easily the words came. "I did forgive him. I just also learned that forgiveness and staying aren't the same sentence. You can let someone off the hook without handing them the fishing rod again." Her mother laughed at that, a real laugh, the first one Emily had heard from her in months regarding this entire situation. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the time I stopped needing him to validate it." Her mother went quiet on the other end of the line for a moment, then said softly, "I'm proud of you, you know. I don't say that enough. You say it plenty, Mom. I just wasn't always ready to hear it. Months passed. Emily's life kept moving in the direction it had already been heading before the wedding ever happened. Forward, steady, entirely her own. She got a promotion at work, one that came with an actual corner desk and a title that didn't require an asterisk. She redecorated her apartment slowly, room by room, choosing every piece herself, answering to nobody's opinion but her own. She started dating again, cautiously, on her own timeline, with someone who remembered which restaurant she liked without being reminded twice, who split the bill without being asked, who once said, unprompted, "I got this one, you got the last one, that's how it works, right?" And Emily had to excuse herself to the bathroom for a moment, because the simplicity of it nearly brought her to tears. She kept the invitation from Daniel's wedding in a drawer for a while, unsure why she couldn't quite throw it away. Eventually she understood it wasn't sentimentality. It was proof. Proof that she had walked into a room expecting heartbreak and walked out with something closer to a plot twist she never could have written herself. Then, on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, picking up a grocery delivery order she'd forgotten she placed, she opened her front door to find Daniel standing on her porch in a delivery uniform 2 sizes too big, a paper bag of groceries in his hands, and an expression that suggested the universe had a very specific, very poetic sense of humor. "Emily," he said, voice cracking slightly. "I didn't know this was your address, I swear. The app just—" "It's fine, Daniel," Emily said, and meant it, in the calm, unbothered way that only comes after you've genuinely healed. He looked smaller than she remembered. Not physically, emotionally. The confidence that used to fill every room he entered had drained out of him completely, replaced by the particular exhaustion of a man who had lost everything and was still figuring out how to carry the weight of that loss. "How have you been?" Emily asked, and she genuinely meant it as a normal question, not a trap. "Honestly, rough," Daniel admitted, shifting the grocery bag in his arms. "The annulment paperwork took forever since we'd only been married a few hours before Patricia's lawyers got involved. I lost the apartment. I'm staying with my cousin now. He gestured at his uniform. "This is actually my second job. First one's at a warehouse." "That sounds really hard, Daniel. I'm sorry you're going through that." And she meant it, in the small, uncomplicated way a person can feel sorry for someone's struggle without wanting to be anywhere near the middle of it ever again. "It is." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just a tired exhale shaped like a laugh. "Funny thing is, I keep thinking about how much easier my life was when I just worked hard for what I had, instead of trying to marry my way out of working at all. Took losing everything to figure that out. I've been thinking about you," he added, quieter now. "About everything. I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance, any small chance, that we could try again?" "I've changed, Emily. I really have." Emily looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, not even really with pity. Mostly with the quiet clarity of someone who had already closed that chapter so completely that reopening it wasn't even tempting anymore. "Daniel," she said gently, "I already forgave you. A long time ago. That forgiveness was never for you, though. It was for me, so I could stop carrying you around." She reached into her purse, pulled out a $5 bill, and pressed it into his hand along with the grocery bag's receipt. "Here," she said. "Buy yourself another apology bouquet. I hear you're getting good at those." She smiled, not cruelly, just finally, fully at peace, and closed the door softly behind her. Daniel stood on the porch for a long moment, staring at the $5 bill in his palm, before finally turning and walking back to his delivery car. Through the front window, Emily watched him sit in the driver's seat for nearly a full minute before starting the engine, his head resting against the steering wheel, shoulders sagging with whatever weight he was still learning to carry alone. He never contacted her again. Looking back on everything, Emily realized something she wished someone had told her at the very beginning of all of this. Forgiving Daniel was never about giving him a second chance. It was about giving herself room to breathe, to heal, to stop measuring her worth by how hard she had to work to keep someone who was never planning to stay for the right reasons. She thought forgiving him meant giving him peace. Instead, it gave karma enough room to do its job properly, in its own time, in a backyard full of string lights and a slideshow that was never supposed to play. There's a lesson in that, the kind of lesson that's easy to say and much harder to actually live. Sometimes revenge isn't necessary at all. Sometimes people chase shortcuts, chase money, chase the easiest version of a life instead of the truest one, only to discover they were running full speed toward their own downfall the entire time. The greatest victory was never watching Daniel lose everything in front of 200 people. It was realizing quietly, in the months afterward, that Emily no longer needed him to lose anything at all. His downfall wasn't her prize. Her peace was. And Patricia, for what it's worth, went on to fund 3 more shelters with what remained of her estate, telling anyone who asked that the entire wedding disaster was, in her words, the most expensive and most valuable lesson I ever paid for. There's another lesson tucked quietly inside this whole story, one that's easy to miss underneath all the chaos, the cake, and the birds flying loose across a reception hall. Pay attention to what people do when they think nobody important is watching. Daniel treated Emily's exhaustion as an inconvenience, long before he ever treated Patricia's money as an opportunity. The signs were never hidden. They were just easy to explain away when love, or the idea of love, was doing the explaining. And Patricia, for all her strange rules about welcome mats and eastward-facing plants, understood something that took Emily years to learn on her own, that boundaries, even unusual ones, are just a way of protecting a life someone worked hard to build. The prenup wasn't cynicism. It was self-respect with a signature line. Emily didn't need a viral video to prove she'd made the right choice walking away. She'd known it the moment she stopped waiting for an apology that would only ever be words. But watching karma catch up to Daniel in front of 200 witnesses, a collapsing cake, and a flock of very confused doves certainly didn't hurt. Sometimes the best ending isn't the one anyone plans out of revenge. It's the one that happens quietly on its own, while a person is too busy building a life good enough that they barely notice karma finishing the job behind them. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way through. Genuinely, it means everything to have you here till the very end. Stories like Emily's are exactly why this channel exists, to remind everyone watching that karma doesn't always need help, and peace is always worth more than revenge. If this story made anyone laugh, gasp, or shake their head in disbelief, drop a comment below sharing the part that hit hardest. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so the next story lands right in the feed. Because trust me, the next one proves that some secrets never stay buried forever.